Chapter 2, Escape from Side 7. The Zabi family doesn't trust me, Lieutenant Commander, Charaznable thought, as light flashed from the Side 7 colony. Something had clearly gone wrong, and he knew he had only two real choices, to send in another strike team or retreat, and given his reputation and character, the latter was hardly appealing. It was he, after all, who had uncovered the information about the new Federation mobile suits in the first place, and he was not about to let anyone forget it. And a promotion, which it might lead to, was the only way he would be able to get closer to the Zabi family. Char's father, Xion Daikun, had founded the original Xion Republic with the help of Degwin Zabi, the current ruler. But 14 years earlier, after Xion Daikun's death, Degwin had repudiated the Republican system of government and changed the country to a principality, purging it of all loyal Republican elements. Char was too young at the time to understand the difference between the two forms of government, but his foster father Jim Baral was, in fact, convinced that Xion Daikun had not died a natural death but had actually been assassinated. Jim Baral had therefore raised Char with a single burning obsession to kill Degwin and topple the Zabi family. At age 15, Char had managed to infiltrate back to Xion alone and, with the help of a few loyal friends of his father, obtained papers identifying himself as Charaznable. He attended a Xion high school and upon graduation entered the officers' academy. It was there that he became friends with Degwin's youngest son, Garma Zabi. And then the war had erupted. Not surprisingly, Char saw it as an opportunity. It seemed mere training for his eventual mission, especially when what was supposed to have been a short, neat little victory for Xion turned into a protracted conflict. Xion had quickly fallen into the grip of Zabi totalitarianism, but a long, drawn-out war, Char reasoned, would eventually rock the foundations of the system. In the interim, he could try to rally some of the old Daikun loyalists and work to topple the Zabi family from within. It had to be done carefully. As much as Char despised the Zabis, he had no intention of letting Xion fall back under the influence of the absolute democracy enforced by the bureaucratic Federation on Earth. The fates are on my side, Char thought with unshakable conviction. Just then the crewman manning the laser search beams yelled, "Lieutenant Denham Zaku is returning, sir!" Char ordered, "Put out some covering fire," and almost immediately several missiles streaked out of the Musai toward Side 7. "Take her forward," he next directed. "We're going to do some scouting around Side 7. The Musai's captain, Heyman Tram, frowned. "But Commander, don't you think that's a little risky?" Char ignored him. The capillaries in the man's nose indicated someone too fond of the bottle, and Char despised anyone afraid to take a chance simply out of fear of being demoted if he damaged his ship. Besides, the fact that Side 7 had not struck back indicated to him that even if Denham had gone on the attack without permission, he had at least accomplished something. 5 minutes later, when Denham docked in the Musai, Char could have called him on the carpet, but he did not. Denham had, after all, brought back valuable information on the Federation mobile suits, including photographs and videos. Scenes of Ensign John Zaku being blown up could provide rare, concrete information on the new enemy weapon's performance. Shortly thereafter, Char took off from the Musai with 7 hand-picked crew members. "Sorry to make you shuttle back and forth like this, Denham," he said, touching his normal suit helmet to Denham's for skin talk while in transit. "But I've got to punish you somehow for disobeying my orders." The reflecting sun visor on Denham's helmet hid the man's face, but Char could sense his shame. As the walls of the Side 7 colony gradually filled the men's frame of view, the Musai initiated a diversionary attack on the port side of the giant cylinder and finally met some counterfire. With that as a cover, Char and his men landed one by one safely on the wall of the giant cylinder. Inside the Side 7 colony, Amuro Ray had not had time to climb out of his Gundam mobile suit since the initial Xion attack. There was so much to do. Help transport an undamaged gun cannon mobile suit to the waiting Pegasus, aid civilian evacuees, and carry heavy construction materials for the Side 7 repair crews. There were an infinite number of ways to put a 16-meter-tall giant to work. To his surprise, Amuro found himself receiving orders transmitted from Warrant Officer Mirai Yashima and Ensign Breet Noah. They appeared alternately on the two-way communications display above the Gundam's main monitor and told him what to do. Sometimes Chief Petty Officer Mark Cran appeared. It seemed that there were no senior officers left, at least not in the command center of the colony's port. What in the world happened up there? Amuro asked Mark. They were on good terms and often spoke to each other. There was a direct hit on the Pegasus, Amuro, and it took out the main bridge and almost everyone on it. Captain Paolo's been badly wounded, so Bright's taken command of the ship from the subbridge. Not a single man from the surface combat units that went down into the colony has come back up. But more than anything right now, we need you to help get whatever's left of the Gundams and gun cannons up here. What about the other pilots? Can't some of them help too? Sean got hit down there, but Ryu or even Kai ought to be around. Ryu's up on the main deck checking the gun cannon we already recovered. Chief Petty Officer Amuro Ray. Mirai Yashima's image suddenly appeared on the screen, reading from a file in front of her and telling him what he already knew. According to this report from the colony, there should be 3 Gundam models and 3 gun cannon models. We've got to get those other mobile suits up here. There's only one other usable mobile suit on this side, Amuro answered her, and that's the gun cannon being transported up to you right now. But he knew that there still might be some usable mobile suit parts and maintenance equipment left in the colony, and that he should haul them up to the ship as soon as possible. He wished his father, who knew something about those things, were around to help him decide what was important and what was not. At the foot of the colony's mountain core, Amuro hoisted the other gun cannon's upper torso onto an elevator platform to send it up to the port area. As he did so, a van-style LA car skidded toward him from Zone B, and a chorus of voices emerged from inside. "You've got to help us." There were around 20 civilians in the van, worried old people and women who looked imploringly up at the Gundam. They too wanted to ride up on the elevator platform, and Amuro did not have the heart to say no. With the Gundam's left hand, he signaled them to climb on board. Up to 3 humans could have actually fit in the palm of a Gundam's hand, but he did not want to risk their falling out, so he was not about to try that. He was more worried about the Gundam's beam rifle, which he still could not find, when the elevator platform finally began its ascent up the side of the colony's mountain core. It carried not only Amuro in his Gundam mobile suit, but also the gun cannon and over 20 people. It rose through the colony's cloud layer, and then another 200 meters above that it reached the port section, with its nearly weightless conditions. There, Amuro made, certain that each of the civilian evacuees with him had a firm hold on the lift grips that would transport them through the port area to the Pegasus. In another group of civilian evacuees in the port area, he caught sight of Fraubo. She looked tiny as she drifted toward him on a lift grip, staring up at his mobile suit with a worried look. "Hey, Frau," Amuro called out, switching the Gundam's voice channel to its external mode. "You all right? Where's your mom? Why isn't she with you? What happened?" At the sound of Amuro's amplified voice, the crowd of people moving on lift grips toward the Pegasus all stared up at his mobile suit in shock. The Gundam had no mouth, but the bulletproof, heat-resistant yellow glass panels covering its optical sensors resembled eyes and gave its face an uncannily human look. There was also something decidedly weird about a giant machine emitting such ordinary familiar language. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen," Amuro quickly announced, trying to explain. "This is a Gundam model mobile suit, and I am its pilot, Chief Petty Officer Amuro Ray." Then he opened the hatch in front of the Gundam's cockpit and found himself looking down at the civilians nearly 9 meters below him. True, he was now in an almost weightless environment where falling had little meaning, but even with his seatbelt fastened, the ground seemed far enough down to make him feel giddy. "Amuro, oh Amuro," a stunned Frau called up to him. "Mom and Gramps are dead." As if Frau's words were a signal, the lift grips transporting Amuro's group of civilians began to move through the port area. The grips were rubberized rings 2 meters in diameter that slid along rails built into the walls and transported people through weightless areas. But if anyone let go of a ring while moving, the inertia alone could easily send him flying over a dozen meters. Because old people and little children lacked the physical wherewithal to control their own momentum, they had to cling desperately to the rings until they came to a halt. "Go with the other evacuees to the Pegasus, Frau," Amuro called out, trying to sound in control. "I'll see you there later." He made sure she got on the third lift grip that came along and then turned and hoisted the gun cannon's upper torso off the elevator platform. In the weightless environment that took a special technique to counter the inertia created, He simultaneously had to exert a counterforce in the opposite direction with the Gundam's other hand. Then he activated the electromagnets on the soles of the Gundam's feet and began walking through the port area toward the Pegasus. Arriving at the ship's number 1 hatch, Amuro found Ryu and several Mechamen already working on the other gun cannon. As he lowered the upper torso of the gun cannon he was carrying, the communications monitor in his cockpit flickered to life, and Ensign Bright's face appeared. "Mr. Amuro, we've got beta test reports on the Gundam from the Side 7 mobile suit test site. I want you to go over these and memorize them. Understand? Better yet, copy him on your computer scanner." Bright's eyebrows were arched, and his voice was high-pitched. He was doing his best under the circumstances, but Amuro had never liked the man's overzealousness. Nonetheless, when Bright sent the documents to the Gundam's upper right monitor, Amuro scanned and copied them into the Gundam's main memory bank and then began displaying them in enlarged format on the main monitor. "I'm blowing up the specs now, sir," Amuro said. "Could you explain them to me?" Then, thinking of his father, he asked, "By the way, how'd you get these?" But Bright was not listening and continued his orders. The Gundam's spare armor plating still at the main test site, and so are the magnetic control coils for the beam rifle. And finally, we've got to destroy whatever's left of the mobile suits that were hit inside the colony. We can't afford to leave anything behind. Can't you let the other gun cannon help me, sir? It'll take too long with just me and this Gundam. Don't worry, kid. I'm not an idiot, Bright replied. I'm going to send Chief Petty Officer Ryu Jose out with you. Sayla Mass had just turned 20. 2 years earlier, she had immigrated to the SS Side 7 colony voluntarily, a rather unusual act since hardly anyone volunteered anymore. Most immigrants nowadays had left Earth against their will. The only people who could remain on the planet were those whose political views were appropriately orthodox, or who had some sort of special connection to the Federation government. Sayla nonetheless had her own reasons for coming to Side 7. She was the daughter of Zeon Daikun. Her real name was Artesia Som Daikun. Her brother was Kasval Lem Daikun, otherwise known in Zeon as Shar Aznable. When Sayla had been 3 years old, her father, Zeon, had died. One of his right-hand men, Jimba Ral, together with his wife, took in the 2 Daikun children and fled the collapsing republic with them to live in safety on Earth. To ensure success, the Rals took an enormous amount of money, with which they purchased the respected family name of Mass in southern Europe. This enabled them not only to pass as full members of Earth's elite society, but also to safely raise both children under the names of Edward and Sayla Mass. Over the years, the Rals repeatedly told the 2 Daikun children that their father had been assassinated in one of Degwin Zabi's plots. When Shar reached high school age, it was this more than anything else that fostered his unshakable desire to return to Zeon and destroy the ruling Zabi family. But Sayla was different. She had grave doubts about her brother's obsession and about the course of action he had chosen. He was her only brother, and he had always been good to her. She did not want to lose him. When she found out that he had secretly returned to Zeon, she wept for 3 days and nights. She began to loathe her foster parents' fixation with revenge and began to hate them instead. She thought about running away from home, but upon hearing that construction was due to begin on the new Side 7 colony, she hit upon the idea of emigrating. It took a year to persuade her aging foster father, Jimba Ral, to let her go. If a father truly loves his daughter, she had lamented one day, why should he derive pleasure from her misery? Artesia, dearest, Jimba had finally replied, giving up. If you insist, you may go. At first, Sayla had hoped to become a doctor, but after deciding to join the SI-7 project, she enrolled in a school that trained mid-level technicians in the maintenance of the Side. And when construction began on the Side's first colony, she emigrated. She wanted nothing to do with the Zeon Republic or the Zabi family. Unfortunately for Sayla, when war erupted between the Federation and the Principality of Zeon, it became impossible not to be involved. Along with other civilians on the Side 7 colony, she was pressed into working for the military, and when she qualified as a communications expert in 6 months, they wanted her to formally enlist. The military was always looking for more qualified people, and nearly a quarter of all personnel in both Federation and Zeon forces were now women, or waves as they were called. In some fields, such as supply, communications, and the armaments, The ratio of women was even higher. Still, no matter how alien and despicable Zeon's social system, Sayla had no interest in going to war with it, especially when it bore her father's name. But then an event occurred that shook her beliefs. As one of the communications personnel on the Side-7 colony, Sayla was assigned to work at the Gundam mobile suit test site and, in case of an emergency, given strict orders to destroy any and all documents to prevent them from falling into enemy hands. After the first Zaku rocket attack, she therefore hurriedly collected and destroyed all the important-looking documents she could find, even if they were only simple code lists for internal use or work schedules. When the attacking Zakus grew closer and closer, Sayla and the other communications technicians left the test site and moved over to the air defense capsule, an emergency escape system connected to the outside world that could, in time of disaster, use the spinning colony's centrifugal force to shoot out of the side. But when the Federation Gundam destroyed one of the Zaku intruders, the resulting explosion warped the escape system rails and rendered it unusable. The sergeant in Sayla's unit therefore issued the order, "Move to the Pegasus," and the group began to head toward the colony's port area. Along the way, Sayla spotted files that someone else had discarded, so she stopped to pour acid on them and burn them. Technically, it was someone else's responsibility, but she did not want to take any chances. If any of the documents survived and the test site supervisor found out, Sayla's entire unit could be slapped around, and she did not want that. She was not about to invite the military, with its love of corporal punishment like slapping and spanking, to apply its hobby to civilians like herself. As a result of her diligence, Sayla lagged behind the rest of the group and had to dash alone across the area where the Zack had been destroyed. She had been taught not to worry about residual radiation after the explosion of a mobile suit or even a warship's nuclear fusion engine, but she knew there were limits to this assurance. After all, if an explosion were big enough to blow a hole in the colony's outer wall, even the whoosh of escaping air could kill a person. Luckily for Sayla, the hole from the Zaku's blast seemed to have been blocked already, probably by objects sucked into it, and the fierce wind had died down. But as she ran toward the elevator platform at the base of the colony mountain, she spotted someone in a red-colored normal suit dash into the ruins of a building. How odd, she first thought, that a Federation unit would use red for its suits. There was also something odd about the way the man carried himself. She stopped in her tracks, picked up a revolver from the body of a fallen Federation soldier, and snuck back toward the ruins. Much to her amazement, she saw the man in the red normal suit pointing a camera at the wreckage of a gun cannon destroyed earlier by a Zack, taking pictures. And then she remembered. She had recently seen a Federation report describing the uniforms used by the Zeon military. The man before her fit the description. Being a civilian, Sayla was under no obligation to engage a Zeon soldier in combat, but in times of stress theory did not always fit reality. Something about the bearing of the red-suited man made her heart pound. Implausibly, perhaps, she almost felt attracted to him. "I've got to capture him," she thought, as her legs propelled her out from the cover of a shattered wall in the ruins. "Take your helmet off and put your hands over your head." She yelled as threateningly as she could. The man in the red normal suit, Char, was mystified. Why had he not sensed the approach of such an obviously rank amateur? True, he had been preoccupied with collecting materials on the Federation's new mobile suits, but that was no excuse. Normally his entire nervous system would have been scanning 360 degrees for anything unusual. It was this ability more than anything else that made him and his Zack feared far and wide as the Red Comet. Perhaps, he considered, the fates wanted him to meet this person and had deliberately created a blind spot in his consciousness. He stood stunned as a young blonde woman in double-handed firing posture pointed a revolver straight at him. Before completely recovering his senses, he noticed that the woman's gun was shaking and realized that she would never be able to hit him even if she fired. He jumped at her. He heard the gun discharge, but he ignored it. The toe of his normal suited foot connected with the gun and sent it flying into the air. The woman staggered back, amazed. The instant he looked into her blue eyes, he knew. It was Artesia, his sister. She flinched and then glared back at him. In her expression he read terror and a defiant refusal to give in. "Artesia!" Char cried. She looked at him, at first puzzled. Then she straightened and looked again. But just then, Char felt the reverberations of giant footsteps, which he knew belonged to of the new Federation mobile suits scrambling down the foot of the colony mountain toward him. That meant he had to get out of the area immediately. By the time Sayla recognized him and rushed forward calling Casval, he'd already spun around, ignited the small Vernier, rocket strapped to his back, and soared into the air. As he maneuvered through the air to get out of the Gundam's field of vision, he heard his sister behind him exclaim, "Casval!" once more as she tripped and fell. Moments later, Sayla was still staring in the direction in which the man in the red normal suit had disappeared, thinking he might have taken refuge in some other distant ruin. To her surprise, behind her she heard the voice of a very young man say, "Climb up on the Gundam's palm. I'm gonna raise this whole area." When she turned and looked up, she saw a giant mobile suit kneeling next to her, extending its left hand. "Hop on board, but keep your head down," the voice said. Immediately below the mobile suit's chest, in the area equivalent to a human solar plexus, Sayla saw a hatch open and a young pilot peer down at her from it. As directed, she climbed onto the mobile suit's hand, whereupon its fingers slowly but gently closed around her, as if forming a shield. It was not a pleasant sensation. She kept her head down and tensed, and then felt a floating sensation as the Gundam stood up and began transporting her. Pushing as hard as she could with her arms against the sides of the steel hand, she tried hard not to fall out. The hand was not designed to carry people. Moving 10 meters above the ground, she closed her eyes to avoid a sense of vertigo. By now, Amuro had found the beam rifle, and when the Gundam reached and boarded the elevator platform at the colony's mountain core, he turned and fired at the mobile suit test site, scoring a direct hit on a stockpile of napalm shells. "That fries the documents all right," thought an astonished Sayla, "but it'll contaminate the remaining colony air." When the elevator platform reached the colony port level, a giant hatch opened to receive the Gundam, and Sayla saw the same red-suited man of her earlier encounters zip by in the air in front of them. He had his Vernier jets on full and roared through the hatch into the weightless environment of the port area. Sayla could feel the Gundam's hand holding her twitch. Its other hand rose up and pointed the beam rifle toward the port but did not fire. Using a beam rifle on a single man would be overkill and might even hit the Pegasus, which was moored 2 kilometers straight ahead. But just when the red normal suit disappeared from view, Sayla heard gunfire coming from the direction of the ship. "Casval," she murmured. As the Gundam strode quickly toward the Pegasus, each footstep created a loud echo. The sound of gunfire ended, but Sayla heard a small explosion from the direction of the port exit hatch. When the Gundam reached the Pegasus in the docking bay, one of the crewmen running around on the warship's deck yelled, "A Zeon infiltrator has blasted a hole in the outer airlock and escaped." No one paid any attention to Sayla as the Gundam gently lowered her to the ground. Behind her, Sayla heard a nearly hysterical voice call out, "Over here! Please, you've got to help me treat some of these wounded." Turning around, she saw that it belonged to a young colonist woman she knew, Frau Bow, on a gangway 2 levels above her. She kicked off the floor and floated up toward her. On the subbridge of the Pegasus, Ensign Bright ordered, "Have the Gundam mobile suit precede us supported by the 2 gun cannons, and give me full combat speed as soon as we clear the colony's port." Then, turning to the ship operators strategically seated above him atop a crane-like arm that gave them a maximum monitoring capability, he called out, "Keep me posted on every move that Musai makes." The operators, Chief Petty Officer Mark Cran and Petty Officer First Class Oscar Dublin, were awfully young, but they were among the most dependable survivors on the bridge and had actually had formal training. Mirai Yashima, the young warrant officer standing in as helmsman, was part of the same student group mobilized into military service as Bright. It was all she could do to cling to the ship's wheel. Almost everyone on the Pegasus was inexperienced. The ship's normal chain of command had been wiped out earlier when the Musai had fired one of its 4 large TAM missiles at Side 7's core, piercing 4 layers of armor and nearly destroying the Pegasus's primary bridge. With Captain Paolo and other officers gravely wounded, except for the men who had been in the ship's engine room, the rest of the surviving crew, including those now manning the warship's guns and the missile launchers, were almost all new recruits. The only mobile suit pilots left alive were all cadets. Amuro Ray would have to handle the Gundam with Hayato Kobayashi as a backup, and Ryu Jose and Kai Shiden at the two gun cannons. The giant four-layered airlock doors of the Side 7 colony opened, and the Pegasus sailed forth from the port. Mirai, manning the helm, bit her lip and looked deathly pale. "You can relax a little, Mirai," Bright said, tapping her on the shoulder. "The laser sensors will help lead us out of here." He was so scared himself that unless he did or said something, he would not have been able to stand the tension. As the Pegasus advanced into the vastness of space, the shining orb of Earth came into view, fully illuminated by the sun. Sometimes it was possible to see little Luna 2 shining above it, but now the asteroid was overwhelmed by the brilliance of the mother planet. Bright called out to the operators louder than need be, "Mark, Oscar, where's the Musai?" "It must be in the colony shadow, sir. We can't get a reading on it." "Mirai, how far out are we from the colony?" 3 kilometers, sir." As soon as Bright heard Mirai's nervous reply, he asked no one in particular, "Can the mobile suits keep up with us?" There was no answer, because no one on the bridge knew. But just then the rear door to the bridge opened, and the ship's medic, Samaro, wheeled Captain Paolo into the room on a gurney. Beads of sweat oozed from Paolo's brow as his eyes hurriedly scanned the instrument readouts. Don't worry about the performance of the mobile suits, Bright," he whispered between stabs of pain. "First get the Musai off our tail." "Maximum combat speed, ready stern missile launchers," Bright yelled, switching the captain's phone to ship-wide. "All crew, double-check the air in each section of the ship." It was not easy to move through space using a normal suit's vernier jets. Shar and his men could not see their destination, the Musai, so they navigated using Luna II and the Side 7 colony as reference points. Checking them every once in a while to keep their bearings, the sun being a primary reference point, and taking into account their own speed, they calculated how many seconds to fire their verniers and in what direction. But they had to be careful to avoid the worst enemy of all free spacewalkers, panic. The physical sensation of floating in a weightless environment could psychologically resemble that of falling, and unless one was constantly reminded that one was positioned above Earth or above a colony, it was all too easy to become totally disoriented. "Musai, do you read me?" Shar spoke into his radio receiver while double-checking to see that his squad of 7 men was still following him. The Minovsky interference was intense, but at close-range radio communication was often possible. "Yes, we read you," came the faint reply from the ship. "Get my Zaku ready, and Denims too," Shar added. "The enemy's headed our way." Shar was determined to engage and fight the new Federation mobile suit he had just seen. What he could tell, it was probably a high-performance model, but he had no way of knowing how well it performed in the vacuum of outer space. After losing a Zaku to the machine inside the colony, he felt that the least he could do would be to find out specifically how it operated. After all, he was not called the Red Comet for nothing. The far right corner of the main monitor and Chief Petty Officer Amuro Ray's Gundam indicated 2 enemy objects approaching. Laser sensors could be accurate on their own terms even with Minovsky interference, but as Lieutenant Rahl had often said, until one confirmed something visually, it was not confirmed. That aside, the monitor indicated something approaching at high speed. On the bridge of the Pegasus, Operator Mark read the same signals and yelled down from his perch at Bright. "Judging by the size, sir, it looks like Zakus, but one of them's closing in on us faster than I've ever heard of. The other's speed matches a Zaku profile exactly, sir," chimed in Oscar, the other operator. "I'm sure they're both Zakus." "Ready anti-aircraft guns," Bright screamed, at the same time glancing behind him at Medic Samaro and Captain Paolo. Thinking he had heard the skipper say something, he went over to the wounded man strapped in his gurney. He bent over and listened and heard a whisper. If it's a fast red Zaku, it's Shar Aznable. He's taken over 10 Federation warships with his machine. They call him the Red Comet. You've got to get the ship out of here." Paolo's face looked contorted, not from the pain of his wounds but from fear, and he said it again. "Get out of here." Out in space in the Gundam suit, Amuro saw a reddish point of light weave through the stars toward him at high speed, and he felt a chill run down his spine. For a second he thought he was looking at a real red comet, but then his main monitor showed a close-up of a red Zaku. In its head, behind a panel that looked like the windshield of an LA car, a pink-colored mono-eye flashed. It was sighting down the barrel of a handheld rifle. Amuro gently twisted the left and right joystick levers in front of him toward each other and felt the sudden G-force as the entire Gundam spun sharply to the right. The Zaku fired, and a tracer streaked brightly through the darkness, but Amuro knew that a single tracer meant his opponent had actually fired a burst of 5 rounds. With a horrible sinking feeling, he remembered the lieutenant's lectures. You gotta watch out for the guys who fire long bursts with rifles or machine guns, 'cause one of the rounds might hit you. But as long as you can still see the barrel of the gun, you're okay, 'cause it means you're still alive. It's the guys who never waste a shot you really should be scared of. They'll really make you stay on your toes. What's that? You want to know how to spot them? Let me tell you, in real combat you'll just know. And when you know, you'll probably be dead. The first thing to do when you sight an enemy is to pray he's an uncoordinated idiot. That's your only hope. Amuro felt lucky. He had managed to dodge the red comet's blast. The left and right monitors in his cockpit began displaying data, but he did not have time to look. It was all he could do to track the enemy Zaku streaking across his main monitor. When the red machine seemed to hesitate, he pulled the trigger for his beam rifle. A multipolar super-electromagnetic coil pulled energy from the engine in the Gundam's midriff, oscillated and accelerated heavy metal particles inside the beam rifle, and then blasted them out of the barrel. Because each shot was accompanied by an enormous burst of light that revealed one's position to the enemy, the rifle was best used only when one was in constant motion. But the magnitude of destruction a blast could cause more than offset the risk. Zakus were so well armored that they could withstand a direct missile hit. The Gundam's beam rifle and beam saber were the only weapons that could take them out. And Zakus did not have them. The blast from the Gundam's rifle sliced through the darkness of space, leaving a trail of white light, but the red comet was already bearing down from another direction. If Amuro had kept his eye on the light, he would have completely overlooked the Zaku. But the moment he pulled the trigger, he knew he had missed, so he deliberately broadened his focus. Like a real red comet, the Zaku bore down on him, and its mono-eye again flashed. Amuro fired the Vulcan cannon built into the Gundam's forehead, knowing it could not destroy the Zaku, but hoping to at least knock one of its camera eyes out of action. The red Zaku swooped left, executing an almost perfect 90-degree turn. Amuro maneuvered the Gundam to square off against it and saw the small monitor on the left side of his instrument panel flash a warning. He jammed the joysticks to put the Gundam into an evasive maneuver and saw 2 bands of tracers. The Zaku had fired twice as many shells as the last time. It was trying for a death blow, but Amuro had managed to dodge it again. Amuro's reflexes were better than average, and the Gundam was responding to them instantly. Against Amuro and his Gundam, any other Zaku would have seemed leaden in reaction. Char's Zaku had undergone fine-tuning, it was true, but he had really earned the name Red Comet for his unnerving ability to coax his machine into giving 110% of its potential performance and to engage the enemy at breathtaking speed. Nonetheless, Char was amazed. As soon as he had obtained information about the new enemy suits being developed, he had conducted mock battles once or twice using other Zakus as stand-ins. But that had been like child's play compared to this. The real White Federation mobile suit turned on a dime above and to the left of him, and beams of light zapped toward him from its rifle. They seemed so powerful. At first he thought they must have come from the big guns on the Side 7 colony itself, and his hair practically stood on end. Then he realized that making a beam gun compact enough to carry as a mobile suit rifle was a diabolical act of genius. Whatever was sacrificed in destructive power was more than compensated for by the MS's innate agility. And it would take only one blast to wipe out a Zaku. The very thought of it made Char's blood boil. There had to be a way he could put the white mobile suit out of action. The Federation pilot was no doubt good, but although he could not really put his finger on it, there was something about the slightly awkward movements of the suit that convinced him the man inside was still a novice. This encouraged him, and he was seized by the same rush of adrenaline he had felt in the past when he had moved in on one of the Federation's Magellan-class warships. The only difference this time was in the size of the target, but Shar was too smart to judge an enemy by size. He had an uncanny ability to evaluate total strengths and weaknesses. Turning his Zaku hard toward where he sensed the enemy would be in a few seconds, Shar exulted, "Got him," when he spotted the white suit. His main monitor displayed the crosshairs of his rifle scope. He lined them up with the gun sight and cranked the mobile suit up to maximum combat speed. It was not a rash act, but a tried-and-true tactic used to overwhelm the enemy. Then he fired. But something unexpected happened. Unlike the Federation forces Shar had met in the past, the white suit had somehow dodged his attack. What was going on? It was then that Shar thought the unthinkable. Could the Federation pilot possibly be a new type? No one in the Federation, he was certain, was yet truly aware of the new type concept. After all, he himself had first heard about it only a few months earlier when he had contacted the Flanagan Agency. It was a theory regarding the emergence of a new type of human. The last thing in the world he wanted to believe was that he was really confronting one now. He wanted desperately to believe that the Federation forces were just using some uncannily skilled pilots. But as implausible as it seemed, although the enemy pilot had first moved like an amateur, he was now appearing more and more like an expert. There seemed far more to the incredible leap in skill level than first met the eye. Biting his lower lip, Shar fired a burst from his rifle. The tracers from it left a trail of light that disappeared between the stars. And then, in the midst of the battle, he heard a brash voice cut through the static in his headphones. "This is Lieutenant Denham. Do you read me?" "Watch out, Denham," Shar yelled back. "The white suit's a tough customer." The fool, he thought, noticing a light on the top right of his instrument panel flash. Denham's Zaku was emitting its FOV, friend or foe, laser ID signals, and in the presence of an alert enemy that could be tantamount to suicide. Denham obviously thought he should identify his position to his superior to avoid a case of mistaken identity, or to avoid getting in the way, but this was underestimating Shar's ability. It was being unnecessarily cautious. Shar barked over the intercom. "Denham, turn off your damn ID signal." But it was too late. Enemy fire streaked out of the area and space where the Federation warship, the Trojan Horse, was and converged on Denham's Zaku. But Denham was a seasoned warrior, a veteran of the Battle of Ruum, and he was not about to let anyone turn him into space dust that easily. And then it happened. A direct blast from a beam rifle pierced Denham's Zaku at its midriff, and it came not from a Federation warship, but from the white mobile suit. First the Zaku slowly scattered beams of light into space, and then it emitted an enormous flash. In an instant it evaporated. "Denham!" Shar screamed, hardly believing his eyes. It was true. The white mobile suit's beam rifle did have as much power as a cruiser's main cannon. Amuro had just dodged a blast from the red comet above and to the right of him when he first detected an odd signal to his FOF ID monitor. The signal source was around 4 degrees above the red comet, and it was another Zaku, apparently moving at about half the speed of the red comet. "Just give me 3 seconds," Amuro prayed as he drew a bead and fired 2 shots from his beam rifle so close together that they almost formed a single band of light. When the beam scored a direct hit in the Zaku's waist, his main monitor reacted to the enormous burst of light that followed by instantly activating an automatic filter. Nonetheless, the screen showed a huge white saucer-shaped orb of light gradually fading into the blackness of space. One down, Amuro exulted to himself. But the next instant, he spotted the red comet bearing down on him straight out of the residual light of the blast. And when his monitor returned to normal, he saw, almost heard, the red Zaku's mono-eye flash. Instinctively, he pulled the trigger for his rifle. Another beam shot forth and crossed in space with one of the tracers fired by the Zaku. On Earth, the sound of a 120mm cannon merging with the supersonic roar of a beam rifle would have been unbearable. But this was outer space. The 2 mobile suits silently crossed paths in the vacuum. And with a shock, Amuro suddenly realized his suit was running low on energy. At the same time Shar began to curse himself, he had run out of ammo. In theory, Zakus were supposed to conserve enough ammunition to last until they returned to the mothership. but the irksome sight of such a humanoid face on the white enemy mobile suit had made him squander his shells. Now, to have the enemy where he could polish him off and to be out of ammo. Glancing back at his opponent, he gritted his teeth in frustration, convinced that he could have scored a direct hit. How could I be so stupid? He swore as he pulled away from the combat zone at high speed. Amuro had no way of knowing the fight was over. He had 6 spare shells built into the Gundam's head, but once the beam rifle's energy was depleted, it took 30 minutes to recharge. There was little he could actually do, but he was too psyched up to quit. He scanned the heavens 360 degrees several times and wandered through the combat zone until the Pegasus finally issued an order to return to ship. When he at last neared the Pegasus again, he opted for the safest docking procedure of all and had the ship reduce power on its main engines as much as possible so he could enter through the rear hatch. Guide sensors all around him went into action, and all he had to do was to line up with them and leave the rest to the computer. Turned. It was Mirai Yashima, the warrant officer. She had a friendly, gentle face, and he wished she would turn around and look at him. But she did not. On the Musai, Char finally returned and ascended to the bridge, where he was greeted by an over-friendly Lieutenant Dren. "That white mobile suit's absolutely terrifying, isn't it, sir? Why, those feds..." Char held up his hand to stop the prattle. He stared out the window of the Musai bridge at the area into which the Federation Trojan horse had disappeared. Luna II had moved out of the glare of Earth and was visible on its own as a shining half-circle. There had been nothing wrong with his basic strategy, but Xion's intelligence-gathering efforts clearly left something to be desired. And never in his wildest dreams had he expected to run into his younger sister, Artesia, on the Side 7 colony of all places. For a moment he started to feel a little sentimental, but he quickly restrained himself. Forcing himself to reflect on the day's action, he muttered to himself, "I hate to admit it, but maybe I made a mistake. I'll just have to write it off to youthful inexperience."